All right, hello and welcome back. I'm Doyle Buehler, and I'm working on a book writing challenge right now. It's 30,000 plus words. I think I'm around 12,000 or plus, that sort of thing. But the concept is about digital disruption, and I personally believe, that you don't need to be Uber, you don't need to be Facebook, you don't need to be Tesla to disrupt your industry, and you don't even need to be a startup as well. So what I'm doing in this book is exploring those concepts for businesses and how they can actually put some of these key ingredients together, and to make a better business, to be able to understand how all the pieces fit together and that sort of thing. So, as I said, this is topic number 5. I've got quite a few left to go, but doing fairly reasonably well on the writing. So I want to talk about patterns. Topic number 5 is patterns. And what this really means is sort of the digital patterns that we see in day-to-day operations and marketing and strategies and that sort of thing. So what am I really talking about here? I'm talking about big data, right? For lack of a better term here. That's kind of what it is, but it's not so much the big data, that expression that I know everybody has heard, if they've been in the digital space, of course. And there's always been the talk of, okay, well, how do we take big data and actually make it useful for us? How do we actually use it for our business? And if you can, then that's kind of where I see that ability for businesses to disrupt is, do they take that data? Do they take that pattern? Because in essence, that's really what we're looking at. It's not so much the data itself, but it's the information from the data that says, hey, we can be doing this, or we should be doing this, or this is our true audience, or this is how we kind of need to be able to develop that topic or subject or product or service or whatever. So if we take a look at sort of the fundamental rules of data, it's just information, right? Hasn't been organized, it hasn't been produced, it hasn't been understood, or that sort of thing. So one of the problems of that quickly comes to mind is that if you're trying to understand this, how do you actually use the information that's good and helpful for your business? And that's obviously the biggest challenge for businesses, is how do you actually use this data? And what I'm suggesting is that yes, we need data, and yes, we need Google Analytics rather, and other tools, and amazing tools like SEMrush, where you get some marketing and competitive information as well. But taking these tools and being able to paint a picture, being able to see what it is actually showing you. And you can actually, if you sort of just reframe it slightly to say, instead of data, it's actually a pattern. And this pattern is, again, it's a trend, it's an opportunity, it's the way things look, it's the way things feel, it's the way people do things, and that sort of thing. So if you're able to pull together these patterns, then that's really kind of where you're going to be able to build that insight and build that disruption, really. And I found a great quote. There we go. Just backing up a bit, the patterns is what I'm developing is this 5 principles of digital disruptions, and I've talked about one already, which is purpose, and the second one is patterns, and there's a few more that are coming as well. But here's a quote I found. People use statistics as a drunk uses a lamppost for support rather than illumination. And that apparently was created by Andrew Lang in the 1930s. There's some history to that, but it's actually quite interesting. So anyway, what I'm suggesting is that how do we take these patterns? How do we understand what they actually mean? How do we take this big data and make it into useful information that then we can actually use to leverage our business, leverage the technology, build a better connection with our audience, and that sort of thing. So if you look at it too, it's kind of like a fingerprint too. Like, what is that fingerprint that you produce? It's very unique to what you do, who you are rather, and you can look at that in the digital space too. It's like that's your fingerprint. That's what, people can identify you, obviously, through the data and that sort of thing. So look at how you can use that fingerprint methodology to kind of understand, okay, well, this is my brand, this is my sense of how I do things. What are those patterns that my customer is looking for, my audience is looking for, that I'm producing, that the technology is providing with me, and that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, what you really want to do though is pull these different patterns together, so that again you can work with them. Because one of the biggest challenges with a lot of businesses out there is that, yeah, they'll get Google Analytics or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but they just become overwhelmed with it. And it's because there's too much information, and that's the biggest problem. We've kind of been grown up with all this information that, you have to have certain levels of traffic and flow and visits and return visits and all that kind of stuff. And it's obviously very important, don't get me wrong, but how is that actually helping your business specifically? Not just a number to say something that, oh, I get 10,000 visits a week, or 20,000 return visits in a month, or whatever. So it's important to understand that, and I think a lot of businesses get overwhelmed with that because you set up Google Analytics and it tells you, oh, I got to do all this stuff, and it's like, well, what does it mean? Right? So you kind of have to figure it out as you go. And if we kind of just jump ship for a bit and say, well, what's really important with your business? It's not necessarily that you have the visits or whatever. It comes back to that information, that pattern, that what do people buy from you and how much do they pay you? So all that other stuff that, yes, you need to have it, you need to understand it, but put it in perspective, right? Can you assess it with goals, with a process? For your digital community and that sort of thing. So can you actually see where people are going, where they're coming from, what are they doing, how are they behaving? What is it fundamentally that they want from you, or what is it fundamentally that you can provide to them? And then that's sort of how you can understand your patterns, right? So, what are some of the specific behaviors of your customer, your audience? And yes, you can call it an avatar or a persona, but the fact is, and I talk about this quite a bit actually, is you need to be able to identify that, because that's how you're going to be able to disrupt your business within your industry. You need to know specifically who they are, what they are, where they are, what they're doing, how are they behaving, how are they interacting, how are they engaging, what do they like, don't like, that sort of thing. So once you have those sort of main pieces, you can then create programs to be able to respond to that, to those patterns as well. So, and then I also talk about, how can I see these patterns, right? So, identify what exactly is going on, and be open and be sort of, I've got some suggestions for being able to, be more specific as well. What patterns do you see around your digital ecosystem? How do you measure advertising results? How do you set up goals? How do you, ask your audience to proceed from one step to the next, and that sort of thing. And I'm going to be talking about buyer cycles and that sort of thing coming up as well, but that's just to kind of get that understanding out there. So how can I see these patterns? What types of patterns are there? I need to be able to identify those. How do they respond to marketing? What is true in your real customer persona? What are your value points and that sort of thing? And then finally, what to do with these patterns, right? That's the whole point. At the end of the day, it's like we have to actually do something with this. So that's key, is that, what do we do with these patterns? So once you've been able to identify them, once you've been able to see what they are, what can you do with it, right? So can you create specific groups? Can you map out your value? Can you identify a process or a starting point that kind of moves your audience along that process as well? So making sure that at the end of the day, you kind of have to simplify the data. And again, that's what really, I believe, slows a lot of businesses down, is that it is pretty complicated. There is a lot of information, but it is too much information. So if you take the equation from big data to building a pattern that identifies those specific behaviors, then you can actually move forward and do something productive. And disrupt is obviously the theme of what I'm talking about. So if you take those patterns, you understand them, you build them out, and you'll be able to create that remarkable value and disruption as well. So, all right, cool. Well, that was quite a mouthful. Anyways, that's about it. So that's all I wanted to talk about on patterns. Hopefully that helps sort of get some ideas out there and that sort of thing. If you do have any comments, please feel free to comment on the posts or the comments or whatever, or send me an email. And like I suggested, if you want to follow along, this is my 30,000 plus word challenge for my second book that's coming out, that I'm writing as I go. Please go to disruptors.digital. And that's about it. So thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will see you online.